Good evening. My name is Michael Watney, and I have the honor of serving as the superintendent of the Fannin County School System. I would like to welcome everyone who is attending this evening at the Fannin County High School Performing Arts Center, as well as those watching us online through Fannin Rebel TV. On Thursday, September 6th, I sent a letter to our community. In that letter, which was written in response to the urgent and troubling issue of vaping in our county, I stated that I was thankful for our community, especially our people, and that I am continually impressed with how our students are always the focus of our entire Fannin County community. Tonight's meeting is an example of this. I assured you that on September 6th, the Fannin County school system would take steps to fight the problem and help those affected by it. Since that day, our school system has been working hard to educate students about the dangers of vaping and the use of other controlled substances. There was an immediate effort to learn as much as possible about this issue and share information through school assemblies, meetings with students, families, and community resources, and an effort began to organize tonight's forum. Many thanks to all of you who have taken this on to protect our students. I will begin by introducing a few who have worked very hard to make this evening a reality. First, Assistant Superintendent Benny Long. One of Mr. Long's duties is safety, and he takes that very seriously. His top priority is the safety of our students, and when I asked him for help to make this event a reality, he stepped up and made it happen. Thank you, Benny. Thanks to Zoe Richter, and also to those here who are responsible for making this presentation go online tonight, the Fannin County High School Technology students. Shay, thank you, as well as the Fannin County School System Technology Director, Heather Finley, and her staff, who helped receive the comments and questions submitted in advance by the community through the internet. Those present in the audience this evening may also submit a question for the panel. Many thanks to our Board Attorney, Lynn Doss, who is here this evening at the back table to help with this. As I mentioned earlier, please see Ms. Doss at the back table if you have a question for the panel. Please understand that no specific student issues or pending discipline or criminal investigations will be discussed by the panel this evening. Of course, the stars of this evening are our panel members. And over to my right, if you'd stand when I call your name, please, Mr. Keith Nuckolls, Principal of Fannin County Middle School. Thank you, Keith. Mr. Eric Cioffi, Principal of Fannin County High School. Ms. Alison Sosebee, District Attorney of the Appalachian Judicial Circuit. Fannin County Sheriff Dane Kirby. Dr. Bill Whaley, Board Certified Physician and Addiction Specialist, who serves as the medical consultant for the Fannin County Sheriff's Office and the Drug Task Force. Melanie Dallas, Chief Executive Officer of Highland Rivers. Ansley Silvers, Director for Addictive Diseases Service at Highland River. And Bill Prather, President of our State Pharmacy Board, who owned a local pharmacy here in Fannin County for over 40 years. Finally, our moderator, who will keep us on track this evening, is Fannin County Middle School Parent Liaison Deb Cantrell. Deb is always looking for ways to help, and tonight's meeting came from an idea that she shared with me right after the letter that I sent. At this time, I'll turn the floor over to you, Deb. Thank you.
Good evening. As Dr. Gwatney said, my name is Deb Cantrell, and I'm one of the parent liaisons for the school system. Thank you again for taking the time to join us tonight. We'll now give the opportunity for the members of our panel to say a few words if they would like to. Mr. Nuckolls, let's start with you.
Ms. Cantrell, it's an honor to be here. Dr. Gwatney, thank you for putting this on. We have a great opportunity tonight as a community, as not just the school system, but this entire community, to try to address a potentially devastating, even worse situation that we are learning about right now. This is the vaping. I am at the middle school, and just by nature, 11 to 14-year-olds will follow and do what they see others doing, whether it's homeschool or otherwise. Oftentimes, these age children will do things without thinking, without understanding the consequence, without even thinking there's a consequence. So it's very important for us at middle school and with your assistants, families, that we train our children that this is potentially devastating. We have not faced some of the same issues that our young people at high school, Mr. Cioffi at high school, have faced yet. But what we hope has happened is we've got a handle on it, and we're trying to take preventative measures, intellectual measures, caring measures to make sure those children are protected as much as we possibly can protect them.
Mr. Cioffi.
Good evening. 930 students is what we have at the high school, ages 14 to 18. And I'll often say if you put 930 adults together, there'll be those that make poor choices. And we're dealing with that age range that they're really trying to find who they are, what they're capable of doing, that we have to deal with the invincibility, they won't get hurt, they won't get caught. But here's the thing, September 6th changed. It changed for us. We deal with behaviors at the high school, but this was beyond just behaviors. This was identifying something that was growing, and it was the term that came out soon after that nationally was an epidemic, and our kids were involved, and it touched across the school. I'm certainly not going to say here every student does it, but I feel very comfortable saying every student knows someone who's doing it. And we are, at this point, not only dealing with the consequence side, but the support side as well, and getting the information out. And this meeting being one of those venues that we can try and support our parents, our community, and certainly our students as they're faced with decisions each and every day. We've met with them in assemblies. Alison Sosebee came to the high school 2 weeks after I met with them because this is a huge concern for us. And I have 3 teenage daughters. I'm concerned for them. But more importantly, 930 kids each and every day are walking through our halls. And so we need to get that awareness out there to our staff and to you folks that are here today, and then those that will be able to watch it online. So very grateful to be a part of this evening.
District Attorney Sosebee.
Good evening. My name is Alison Sosebee, and I'm the District Attorney for the Appalachian Judicial Circuit. And as a result of that, I represent Fannin, Gilmer, and Pickens counties. I am here really, I think, probably in 2 capacities tonight. One as the District Attorney, but 2 as a mother with children in the Fannin County school system. I currently have 1 child who is at the Fannin County Middle School, and I have another one who's coming up through the ranks. And I know that this issue with vaping and addiction and the unknown dangers that are associated with that concerns me in both of those capacities. On August 31 of this year, I received a telephone call coming from another county, and it was from an administrator of that county school system, and they wanted to advise me of an issue that had happened that day at school. And what they wanted to tell me was the student had gone into the bathroom, had vaped an unknown substance, and as a result of that had fallen out. It appeared that the child had gone into a short psychosis, and as it was stated to me, when the child came to, he attempted to rip his tongue from his mouth. He was so disoriented. We discussed what we could do in terms of intervention in juvenile court at that point. It was on a Friday. And when I returned to work on the following Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, there were 9 additional medical emergencies that had occurred on a circuit-wide basis in Fannin, Gilmer, and Pickens counties where students had been vaping at school, and they either, as a result, had a medical emergency, had to be treated by EMS, and or be transported to the hospital. I will completely applaud the administrators in our school system in Fannin County, Sheriff Dane Kirby, Superintendent Whaley, and everyone else involved, not only in this county, but there was a collaborative effort across the entire Appalachian Judicial Circuit. And these items became collected from the students, and they were sent to the crime lab. And when the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab discovered what had been happening in our area, they classified this as an epidemic in our region. I know a lot of people don't realize in terms of what it takes for us to be able to get crime lab results back, but normally we wait on average of about 12 months to get a substance tested. They gave us a 24-hour turnaround time because they did not know what was happening to our youth. At that point in time, we were able to identify one of the substances that was occurring as a Schedule I controlled substance called Panaka. It's a synthetic cannabinoid, and it is actually in the same schedule as LSD and as heroin, with no recognized medicinal value and highly addictive in nature. This is what some of our students were ingesting in our school system and having medical emergencies. In a true collaborative effort between all of the law enforcement in our 3 counties and the Drug Task Force, search warrants were simultaneously executed in each one of these counties in an attempt to identify some of the locations that our youth and our students were obtaining these substances from. I cannot tell you how thankful I am to be the district attorney here in this circuit, but also to be a citizen, because seeing the schools and law enforcement come together in such a way to protect our youth has really warmed my heart. With that being said, I know that there has been a perception in the past that vaping is no big deal, that you are just simply ingesting flavored water, that there is really nothing to it. And the problem that we're facing, not only in North Georgia, not only in the state of Georgia, but as a nation as a whole, this is almost a completely unregulated industry. You don't know what you're ingesting. There is no testing. You are at the mercy of the person who is providing it to you. And that is what has been so scary. And that is part of the stance that the District Attorney's Office, law enforcement, and the schools have been taking in an attempt to address this issue and protect our students. I want to thank everyone that is here tonight and everyone that is watching this, because I truly think this is a beneficial thing that's occurring. Thank you.
Ms. Dallas?
There we go.
As District Attorney Sosebee said, I commend this community for coming together on this. We work, as the CEO for Highland Rivers, we serve the 12th county area up here in northwest Georgia. And we have seen occasions where the community doesn't rise up. They don't pay attention. They think this is a one and done event. And they don't recognize the seriousness. So at this point in time, tonight, whether you're here in the auditorium, whether you're watching this being broadcast, there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to engage in a conversation that impacts our community before a tragic event occurs. We haven't had a child death related to this, but everyone on this panel can tell you that if we don't look at this seriously, we don't support the youth and the families in our communities, that could be on the horizon. That is how serious this is. And so I invite all of you to engage in this conversation long past tonight, because in 6 months, in 1 year, we don't need to be having the same conversation we had tonight. It needs to be a different conversation about how we've come together, how we've responded to a crisis, how we've impacted the lives of youth and families in our community. And to me, I see that as our opportunity in what we can talk about tonight. Thank you.
I appreciate, I'm Ansley Silvers, and I appreciate being welcomed and asked to come and participate in the community's efforts to address this issue. Not only have I been a treatment provider of addiction for 25 years, but I'm also a mother of 3 teenagers and am not immune to addiction, and have had to watch my son bury 2 friends due to synthetics. I don't take this very lightly at all. No one is immune. We're dealing with adolescents and adolescent brains and not adult brains. And so it's very important. I have learned over the years is education, 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 to talk about it, because addiction as a whole carries a stigma, which means most people think it's a moral decision or a choice. It may start that way, it may start that way in your teens, but the damage that's occurring to the brains of these developing individuals is frightening. And so I think it's critical for this community to pull together, to understand that addiction is treatable and people can live in recovery, and that you can also prevent addiction through education. Thank you.
Dr. Whaley?
I'm a medical oncologist, but in 1969 I was the founder and the medical director of the largest narcotic treatment program in the world. And my wife and I have devoted 35 years of our life before we moved to Blue Ridge in drug and alcohol abuse prevention. We've had one addicted child. I'm the only board certified addictionist that I know of north of probably Canton. And as I was putting this together, my nurse said, "Do you realize that 15 years ago on your radio program on Wolf Creek Broadcasting," some of you who remember Wolf Creek Broadcasting, they had AM in McKaysville and FM in Blairsville, you first started talking about cell phones. And then when I started putting this together, I realized that what I was talking about then has become an epidemic today. And I'm not going to begin by talking about vaping. I'm going to begin by talking about dominoes. The first domino has to hit the second domino, has to hit all the rest of the dominoes. And some of these written-in questions ask, is vaping a gateway drug? I want to talk about sequencing of behaviors, and it begins with saying that unrestricted cell phone use, has nothing to do with vaping, leads to sleep deprivation syndrome in middle and high school students. I'll stop there by saying if you're a real reader of the newspaper, about 10 days ago, a national study was published looking at the highest achievers in middle school testing and high school testing and the lowest achievers, and they divided them out by how many hours of screen time did they have per day, how much time did they sleep, and how much time per week did they spend in play or physical activity. The number of 2 hours per day or less, only 12% of middle school and high school kids spend less than 2 hours a day on a screen. When I began talking about this on Wolf Creek Broadcasting, the screen was the home video game. And I said to the parents, when you were children, if the preacher was there or the grandparents were there, your parents wouldn't let you read a magazine, a newspaper, or a comic book. They'd slap it out of your hand. When your kid picks up a video game or a cell phone in adult company, he's saying, you're not important. This is more important. What happens with kids that have unfettered use of the cell phone is they take it to bed at night. They then do social media at night and they text at night. And that's the reason that middle school kids, I'm going to stick with that first, are getting less than 6 to 8 hours of sleep on the average night because they've got the cell phone. There is no legitimate reason for a high school kid or a middle school kid to have a cell phone after 8 or 9 o'clock at night and until after they've had breakfast in the morning. It ought not be in the bedroom with them. Kids then become sleep deprived. The first thing they do when they become sleep deprived is they gear up to energy drinks. I'm going to go to that, come back in a minute. If you see those drinks in the hands of your adolescents, they contain more caffeine on the most than 2 or 3 cups of coffee. I didn't have my first cup of coffee till I was a freshman in college. There's no legitimate reason for a kid in high school or grammar school to ever have one of those drinks in their hands. They should not be fatigued. They should not be feeling that they need 5-hour energy. And if they do, there's a failure somewhere. They should have been in bed. After they got sleep deprived and go to the energy drinks have high caffeine. The next thing they go to, because it's available in the school, is nicotine. I'm going to say more about it in a minute, but there's some questions about the nicotine that are going to shot stone in the manger. As soon as they get to nicotine, they'll put cigarettes at home, Papa's going to snatch one out of their hand, but they begin to vape. And there's nothing good that can come from vaping. If you look at the bottom picture down here, I wish, I do have it coming on. Where is it? Pointer. The original vapor was a cigarette-looking device. The question's asked, is there a legitimate use? Yes. As an addictionist, I'll tell you, there's a legitimate use for the nicotine-containing cigarette, generally in the hands of an addiction group or a lung group stop smoking program or a cancer center stop smoking program for people who are adults and heavily addicted who have failed transdermal nicotine gum, they failed cold turkey, they failed everything else, and when you're using it appropriately, that original cigarette was not inappropriate. However, that digital cigarette had less nicotine or the same amount of nicotine as a regular cigarette, more later. It's harder to kick nicotine than it is to kick heroin, narcotics, or alcohol. There are two treatment professionals right there. I was outpatient director of a huge program called WAFA, and I was the one for the pilots at Anchor Hospital. And you go to an AA meeting, a CA meeting, or an NA meeting, and before it and after it, they go out into the hall and they smoke. Why do people who can kick heroin, kick meth, or kick other addictive drugs smoke? There are 3 binding sites in the brain. I won't bore you with them. But one of them is specific for endorphins. That's why when I ran 40 miles a week and was high, that was called endorphin. That's also heroin or narcotics. There's one that's specific called the GABA-B receptor for alcohol and benzodiazepines. That's the Xanaxes and stuff. And then the last one is one for cocaine, methamphetamine, and stimulants. Well, all 3 of those binding sites are hit by nicotine. And so if you're addicted to the rest of them, you kick the big one and continue to smoke. Now here's the thing that bugs me. That looks real funny. Let me call you back that teachers distracted me. I really don't believe that there ought to be a cell phone in the school building. I believe that the kid that's in the band, I saw all the band kids going out there, they need a cell phone after school. It might start raining and lightning and they got to call their mom and say, look, they tried to cancel band practice. That's great. But they don't need it in the school. If they break their leg, get appendicitis, they can go back to the locker or where they're supposed to keep them and then use them. But if you sit outside here, and I did that for 15 minutes before Dane came in, I saw that scene right there in about 8 places on this campus, people sitting around doing that. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on nicotine. Everybody knows about it. But the big issue with nicotine that you don't understand is that this product that they just discussed, one nicotine vape has more nicotine in it than 20 standard cigarettes. That's why from energy drink to vape is a dose of nicotine that is quickly addictive. It is my understanding from the adolescents that are the children of my staff, the big staff, is that the first vape nicotine that they received in this community was given to them by a classmate. But the second one had to be purchased. When I was a freshman in college, first meal of the day coming out of the cafeteria, there was people giving out the little 3 packs of Camels and stuff, free. We got free Camels and stuff each meal for the first 4 days of college. And what happened next? Those of us that liked them had to go buy them. The energy drink is a stimulant that rated your heart rate up. I mean, everybody that's in addiction has had people who had nicotine overdoses and they get like that. We don't know how many of these nicotine reactions of these kids have been, but there is no legitimate place for that drink in the diet of an adolescent or a middle schooler. I'll just stop with that. The vaping industry and the advertising is astronomical. and they are seeing vaping now in their TV and social media things. People doing it as part of their atmosphere of what they look at, you know, like Michael Jordan bouncing the basketball. People now are vaping. But this Juul, the company that makes this thing here, their sales up 675% in the first 6 months of this year. One more time. Their sales are 675% higher in the first 6 months of this year than they were in the previous year. That's because vaping in the adolescent community has gone up by over 300% in less than 12 months. I wish I could have thought about it and bought the stock. As you may well know, they had the offices raided earlier in the week and their stuff was taken away from them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time about it, somebody else already has, but the vaping materials, there are 700 different things that are sold to vape. They have all sorts of microparticles in them that you don't know. People who've heard of the popcorn lung from spraying, what do you call that stuff, butter on your popcorn spray, the disease that's caused by vaping, it has nothing to do with abusing drugs, is an infiltrative and inflammatory lung disease called popcorn lung. There are only, I believe, 75 to 150 harmful chemicals in the vaping materials that are legitimately marketed, not the ones that are being made at the 7-Eleven. Lastly, I want to talk about the liver and the brain. Back in the early days of my research, I was one of the researchers on taking marijuana and using it for chemotherapy. The developing brain and the developing liver are not mature until you're in your mid-20s. Kids grow till they're 16 or 17, but their livers and their brains don't stop growing until they're in their mid-20s or beyond. And the products that are present in the vaping materials, the nicotine and the rest, all are inhibitory to the hypothalamic, pituitary, ovarian, testicular axis, which means the ability to grow, the ability to think. And they've got no place in my child or your child's use. I think I'm going to stop right there and wait till they start asking questions because they got plenty of them. Didn't mean to get on my soapbox.
Mr. Prather, do you have anything to add?
Yes, this is on. As President of the State Board of Pharmacy, our job is to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the citizens of Georgia as it pertains to primarily prescription drugs. Those are the things that you go into the pharmacy, you take a prescription from your physician, and the pharmacist fills that prescription with the appropriate drug. It would also include pharmacies and hospitals. About 2 years ago, we started to get a lot of questions and noticed a lot of movement with drugs called cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are chemical moieties that come from the cannabis plant. There are over 100 of them, and just those by themselves are bad enough. But what we're running into now is these drugs are being chemically altered, primarily in China, in their laboratories. They're being sent to the United States. They're coming primarily through Mexico, and then they are distributed all over the United States. What they do is they take, and for those of you that remember all of your organic chemistry, they take a cannabinoid and they move chemical moieties around. They'll take an oxygen and put it down here. They'll take a hydroxyl group and put it down here. What that does is it creates a completely new drug. Now, a couple of years ago, we tried to add to our dangerous drugs list that we update all the time, that include all the Schedule 1 narcotics, which is a narcotic that has no accepted medical use in the United States. We tried to outlaw all cannabinoids. We were told that we could not do that. We had to outlaw those drugs one at a time. So, they will identify chemist will identify that and will send back to us, okay, that's already on your dangerous drugs list. And it being on the dangerous drugs list has a great deal to do with how law enforcement can deal with it. If it's not on the dangerous drugs list, then we don't wait for our next monthly meeting. We will have a telephone conference and immediately add it to our dangerous drugs list. So this whole cannabinoid thing is, cannabinol thing is new to us. We're not accustomed to dealing with that, but we are dealing with that. And I think this has come about because of all the discussion that has gone on surrounding marijuana, THC, the active ingredient of marijuana, the cannabinol that lets you high, is just one. And right now it still is scheduled by the DEA as a Schedule 1 narcotic. Many states have legalized marijuana as a medical marijuana. Many states now are legalizing it as recreational marijuana. All these cannabinoids that are coming into the United States are coming from those plants. And they're being altered, and this is what our young people are going out and ingesting, whether it be powder form, liquid form by vaping it, injecting it, putting it up your nose. I have not heard of any of them making them into suppositories and inserting them, but that would work too. So if you have any questions about those or about our drug list, I'll be happy to try to answer them going forward.
Thank you all. Before we get started with our questions, I wanted to let you know that Dr. Whaley's PowerPoint and District Attorney Sosebee's PowerPoints will be online and available for you guys to see. I know some of those slides were hard to see from where you're at. Also, please remember, if you have questions that arise during the presentation, see Dr. Gwatney or Ms. Doss in the back table. At this time, we will read the questions that were submitted previously online and direct them to members of our panel. Mr. Cioffi, the first question is for you. What is the punishment for vaping at school?
It's changed. Mr. Ansley, if you could go back to that second slide. It was about 6 years ago, we had to add to our student code of conduct electronic cigarettes, e-cigs. And we kind of categorized those under the same umbrella as a nicotine offense, such as dipping tobacco or smoking cigarettes. And it had been a pretty standard discipline, 3 days in school. This summer, there's been a shift. As Dr. Whaley's talked about, the juuling industry and the different items students could purchase became cheaper, more affordable, and as you can see, concealable. A lot of the ones these were taken here at the high school on September 6th. And what you're noticing is they look very similar to USB ports. They could have been sitting out in homes, and we just, as parents, would not have been able to identify it. Those two in the top left-hand corner look very similar to those original iPods. And then there's a little teardrop on the bottom right-hand corner. And that looks like it could belong in a young lady's purse, and we wouldn't give it a second look. When this all went down that week, there was obviously a growing concern of what was being consumed into our students. And we have discipline codes that go from nicotine all the way up to illegal drugs. And what I wanted to do was find a consequence that was clear to our students that we were going to do everything we could to try and remove this from our campus and try and get our students away from being exposed. So I kind of took a middle ground. So beginning September 7th, if a student is caught with any vaping product in possession of or being caught in the act, they will receive a 5-day out-of-school suspension. They'll also be put in our database where if they had a second offense, then they would be recommended to the alternate school. So going forward, it has changed. We've taken it from a nicotine-only offense because now we have a little more knowledge. We are not sure what is inside or what they're purchasing or what they're adding to these items, and so we're going to take a pretty hard approach with it. We do have counseling resources in our counseling office for those students that have asked for help, and they have. So we want to make sure they're getting those treatments as well. As far as discipline, that's our standard discipline going forward.
At the middle school, we take the same approach. Like I said earlier, we don't have as many examples to use. We've only had 2 that we know of and that we've had to address where students possessed this vape item. We have had that, I would say, in middle school, kids, they still are on the side of what is good for their friends. So if the word is out there that someone may possess an item, then they are very, very quick to come and tell us. You see, that's helpful. Some people don't appreciate that, but we love that with our kids. That means they still have a fear. So we can use that and we can encourage others to be a part with us. Come and let's get help. But we do have the same punishment schedule as the high school. And we've had to take a higher approach with it, and it's basically because the vape is a more immediate danger than what traditionally tobacco may be. Tobacco is a long-term product that will kill you. That's proven. It's dangerous. We don't want our children developing that habit and building that up in their 12, 13, 14-year-old brains. But it is the vape that is the immediate danger that we don't know enough about, that we have to take the high ground to. We've seen what it's doing, and we will take every measure to protect our children as much as possible as far as punishment.
Deb, I just want to add one more thing.
Sure.
You know, on that day, for me personally, I had to carry a student from a classroom to the clinic so they could be transported. And the first thing I could start thinking about is we were fortunate that where it occurred, there were adults there to take care of her and get her treated. My biggest fear was, what if these students had gotten in a car, driven off the hill, and then went down? They could have caused injury to themselves or to somebody else, and that could have changed their lives. So the medical unknowns, as Mr. Nuckolls just pointed out, we know long-term effects of nicotine. We do not have the information on long-term effects of what they're putting in their system. I can tell you in some cases the immediate effect happens right then, and it can change their lives. So that goes along with the hard approach.
Mr. Cioffi, the next question is for you also. Are students that bring dip on campus going to face the same consequences as students that bring a vape on campus?
Dipping cigarettes will continue to fall under the nicotine discipline code of conduct, which would be 3 days in school suspension. And if there was a second offense, we don't go backwards in discipline. It becomes a little longer in school, and it potentially could be out of school. But no, they are in separate categories at this point.
Dr. Whaley, you touched on this on your PowerPoint, but I wanted to see if you had anything else or anyone else from the panel had anything else to add. The next question is, are there any good uses for vaping?
I hope that I was clear that the industry began with good thoughts in mind to substitute a non-tobacco form of nicotine into stop smoking programs for the heavily addicted. The drug Chantix that you see advertised is exceedingly expensive, and most insurance companies don't pay for it. And as I mentioned there, it's a very difficult addiction to break. Not that it can't be broken, but it's a difficult addiction to break. And there are places where the continued use of nicotine is a lot like the use of Suboxone or methadone in a heroin addict. That yes, there are legitimate places for it, but it's generally in the hands of a therapeutic relationship between an addicted patient and somebody, whether it's a support group or a professional.
And if I may add something to that, and I agree in terms of what Dr. Whaley is saying about it being a substitute for traditional smoking or dipping tobacco, but the problem that we face is we don't know what is actually contained in those vapes, that you're just naturally assuming that it may be a nicotine product. What we have seen, what the crime lab has shown us, and what we are dealing with in a lot of these situations is we have a Schedule I controlled substance. And that is very scary, because what has came out of a lot of this in terms of the presentations at the schools through the school communication and law enforcement involvement and through other presentations is the fact that we have students who are already addicted to whatever substances that they were ingesting. And they have came forward, their parents have came forward, and they are asking for help to break that addiction because they don't know how. So I do think that there's a large concern, because the market is so unregulated, that you just couldn't simply identify a vape juice as only containing nicotine.
Thank you. Mr. Cioffi, this question is for you also. How can we be sure that vaping won't be happening in the bathrooms or other places?
That's a good question. We have a lot of space up there, a lot of acreage. And then also, our students bring their vehicles on campus. So at any given moment, we'll have 1,000 people walking around. And there's freedom in high school. They've got classes spread out all over the place. So it's not just bathrooms, it's hallways, it's stairwells, it's vehicles, it's any place you can turn a corner. Because these vapes are designed, they're small, there's not a lot of smoke coverage, they can take a quick hit, and it dissipates rather quickly. So awareness is a key. I met with our faculty. Some of our faculty had never seen any of those items before. They could have felt like they could have been sitting on a student's desk and they wouldn't have had an idea of what it was. So that was our first step. Let's get it out there, the information out there. With that date, September 6th, it also scared our kids. Let's be clear about that. When kids are transported to the hospital, there is a concern that flows across the school. So a lot of conversation, a lot of names, and a lot of students were called in and met with. So we've gotten that information out. We have looked at some increased technology devices that can be placed in restrooms, in locker rooms, that can help detect these types of things. So we are in the process of looking to see if those would be a good fit for us. Proximity being out, you know, we talk about vehicles with kids coming on campus from 7:30 and being up here until well after. Well, if we go out there now, you'll see cars in the parking lot. You know, we don't want our kids unsupervised. We understand they're teenagers and we want them to have those freedoms. But at the end of the day, I'm the one responsible ultimately for the student safety at the school. And I will do everything that we can to ensure that safety. And if that means once you come on campus, you need to come into the school where the adults are at, that's what we're going to need to do. It's not designed to be a punishment. It's designed to be a situation where we can look at you and say, your child is at a safe school. We have fantastic kids. And that's the scary part of this is the population this is affecting is across the board. I wouldn't trade our student body in for any student body. And they're involved. And so we have to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can so they're not in the restrooms. It's constantly going in there and making sure that the best choices are being made.
Thank you. Dr. Whaley, we'll start with you on this question and then anyone else on the panel that wants to answer it. What are the dangers and health risks to vaping?
I think we've all been pretty clear. The first one is you don't know what you're getting. Therefore, you're taking a risk on Chinese entrepreneurship. And addiction I think addiction to nicotine is bigger than the addiction that's going to occur with the other things that are in there. So, addiction, nicotine poisoning, whatever drug happens to be the drug of the day in the vape. But if you had just a vape and just stuff that came from the Juul company and wasn't all messed up, the popcorn lung, if you're using it routinely, and people can use that vape much more than they smoke cigarettes. A pack of cigarettes, fills up your pocket and use all day. Some people were hitting the vape 6 and 10 times an hour all day long, and that gives you lung disease. There's nothing good going to come of vaping unless you're an old person and you got an addiction. So, and that's the minimum use of vape.
Okay, Dr. Whaley, I think you were clear. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Prather.
I think the real message here is the fact that when you go out and you purchase a product, to vape it, to take it, to snort it, to inject it, to do whatever you want to do to get it in your system, you have absolutely no idea what you're putting in your system. If you're very, very unlucky, maybe somebody has put some really high-performance narcotics into that, and you put it in your system, take 10 or 12 steps, and you drop dead. Or you hit the ground, they take you to the hospital, and your respiration is 0, and they can't save you. It just appalls me that any person, but particularly any person, young person, would take something that they know absolutely nothing about and ingest it into their system. You'd be much better off eating roadkill possum than you would doing that, because at least you know, by God, it's a possum.
Thank you. I know you touched on, I'm sorry, Alison.
No. And I was going to say something akin along those lines. One of the things that I think really kind of concerns me, even as a parent, is, you know, for years and years and years, I think we were all inundated with this concept that, you know, smoking was cool. I mean, it was in your face. It was subtly in the movies. I think everybody probably over the age of 30 remembers the Marlboro Man. I mean, it was something that we were really kind of hit with. And it took decades upon decades upon decades for the tobacco industry to finally admit that smoking kills you. There was an article on NBC News that came out in November 2017 where the big tobacco companies were forced to admit smoking kills 1,200 people a day. With that being said, vaping is such a new industry. We don't have medical research to know truly the long-term effects of what it's going to cause. And one of the things that's so important to me to impress upon the students is don't be the lab rats or the guinea pigs for the vaping industry, because all they are wanting is a piece of that multi-billion-dollar a year market.
Okay, the next question is for you, Dr. Whaley. Is vaping considered a gateway drug?
Yeah, I try to make that crystal clear. I think the nighttime use of the cell phone is a gateway drug to energy drinks, to the nicotine, and absolutely vaping is a gateway drug without a shadow of a doubt.
I'm not an MD, but I'm an MA. So I'm going to try to get this right. I feel a little intimidated with him next to me. You know, we're talking about decision-making, and, you know, brain development, and we're expecting these kids to think like an adult and to think through things. And so as far as vaping being a gateway drug, I don't know that I can say that. I can say that for years I heard marijuana was a gateway drug. Marijuana was a gateway drug. In my mind, that was, well, because that's usually what you start with, you know, and you know, marijuana and alcohol, and then you know, it grows from there. So I did some research, and I found out that marijuana to a developing brain actually chemically changes one area in the brain. Yeah, okay. And that this person, for the rest of their life, is now more susceptible to addiction, to illness, inability to make sound decisions. And so I think that is why marijuana can be considered, you know, a gateway drug, not necessarily the vaping, but I may be wrong later on. I've been wrong before. But I think that the issue is, you know, I have a 13-year-old who loves Red Ribbon Week. She loves Crazy Hair Day. She loves the Funky Socks Day, or wearing, you know, her clothes backwards, or whatever we do. And to hear her talk, she'll never do drugs. She wants to be an FBI agent, or she wants to be a lawyer. But then I have an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old. When they were seniors and juniors and sophomores, Red Ribbon Week went unnoticed. I knew it was Red Ribbon Week because of work. They didn't talk about it. And so I think the interest that you're seeing in your community of what do we do, I think we need to start tailoring what we're doing to draw that attention and awareness to teenagers and beef it up, and let's have it continuous, not just 1 week a year. You know, let's have something incorporated and educated into them to explain what is happening to your brain and why you don't need to use. Because if you take brain development, a graph of brain development, you know, from 14 to 24, and you take experimental drug use, they're almost identical. So I think we as parents, or I even know, you know, me as a parent, and as an addiction counselor, sometimes I miss that boat, that there are children who are just adamantly not going to use drugs until they hit their sophomore year, and then it's like, hey, what's that? So I think as a community, and kind of the best response to that is to really be more involved and be more vocal and talk about the why. You know, Nancy Reagan always just said, say no. Well, if I tell my children no, their response is, well, why? So I think we need to constantly remind them as to the why.
Just one thing to add about vaping. I think what we need to remember that vaping is like a fork, right? So so if you're eating something, it's about what's on the fork, not about the fork itself. And so vaping is a way to get whatever substance is out there into the system. And I think that's part of the issue that Alison brought up. What happens is, I think kids have no idea what is actually in that. You may assume that it's nicotine. It may not be nicotine. And clearly what we have found through this last month is that many times it is not nicotine. And so vaping is a mechanism to deliver something. And I think if we can just educate that just know, you know, most folks probably aren't going to want to put the roadkill possum on their fork, right? In that same way, you know, do you know what is actually in that vaping? Because it's just a mechanism for delivery. Well, might not. Exactly.
Thank you. District Attorney Sosebee, we'll start this question with you. Will I be punished or go to jail if I ask for help?
Absolutely not. I will tell you, one of the things that I was so surprised when we all got hit collectively as a community in terms of the vaping incidents that were occurring and came together, one of the primary focuses that we had was about education and awareness, not only to the students, but to the parents and to the community. And part of that educational component going into the schools was to explain to the students, okay, these are going to be not only the practical consequences if you are caught vaping, but there are several other consequences that could occur as well. And part of those were legal consequences. Most people don't realize that you are charged as an adult in the state of Georgia at the age of 17. You can't vote, but you are going to be treated like an adult in the criminal court system according to the statutes. So for the offenses that we're talking about with vaping and underage possession of tobacco products, because that's where the vaping products fall under, all of those, if you're under 17, are going to be handled in juvenile court. When that is being handled in juvenile court, you're subject to probation, fines, community service, potentially even the youth detention center. As an adult, when you're charged, it could either be a misdemeanor offense, which is punishable to up to 12 months, probation or incarceration, and up to a $1,000 fine. But the problem with what we're seeing in some of the substances that we're obtaining, particularly that Schedule I controlled substance, the statute says for a first offense, depending on the weight and the amount of the substance that you have, to be punishable for up to 15 years in prison and a $100,000 fine. So when we go into the schools and we're talking and we're explaining what the consequences are, and obviously that is an absolutely extreme situation. No one wants to send a 17, 18, 19-year-old to prison, period. But it's to explain, this is the dangerous path that you're traveling. And one of the things that I think that has been tremendously important in terms of the collaboration with the school systems and with law enforcement and with the district attorney's office, with Highland Rivers, is to impress upon the students and anybody in the community that if you come in for help, if you want help, that is absolutely not a punishment aspect. We don't want to punish you. We're actually here to help you and try to find a way to help you. And I will applaud the school systems for coming together and offering the services that they offer. And candidly to Highland Rivers as well for stepping into this situation and understanding they are willing to send addiction specialists to the schools, into our communities, potentially into our homes, to help address this with our youth and the people in our community to make sure that we get better.
Okay, Ms. Silvers, we'll ask you this question, the next question. How can I stop safely if I am addicted?
Well, that would depend on what you're using, is how you can safely stop. You know, whether you're using and you try to stop because you don't think you've reached the addiction stage yet. Regardless, we are always here to help. So if you want to stop, you know, you need to treat it just like you would a broken finger or the flu. You don't hesitate to go to the doctor and receive medical care. If you feel like you are having trouble stopping from a substance, you need to treat that the same way. You need to come and ask for help. I think one of the barriers to people stopping or safely stopping is associated with the stigma with addiction, that it's this moral decision and you should just be able to quit and think better of yourself. You know, you need to feel just as comfortable asking for help with addiction as you would diabetes or cancer or the flu.
Let me give a quick medical discussion about this just for educational purposes. If you're arrested and thrown in the jail, or you break your leg and you go in the hospital, then you are suddenly off drugs. If you're an alcoholic and very heavily addicted, the acute withdrawal syndrome, which really doesn't occur all the time, is called delirium tremens. And you see it in movies where you see elephants and stuff. It used to have a fatality rate of 5 to 7%. It lasts 72 to 96 hours. You get well and it's over with. So an acute throw you in the jail or break your leg, your alcohol's out of your system generally in 4 days. If you're acutely addicted to narcotics, narcotics are like what you take for diarrhea, locomotive. And if you're taking a high dose of narcotics, your gut has learned how to work on narcotics. So when you get thrown in the jail or go in the hospital and suddenly come off, your gut begins to understand that you're off narcotics. And you bend over like that, you start having cramps like this, you get piloerection on your skin, and you shake like that, and you look like a cold, plucked turkey. And that's where the word cold turkey comes from. It's got nothing to do with cigarettes or alcohol, it's specific to narcotics. Now, you stop smoking, you have an increased heart rate, tremor, increased respiratory rate, but no withdrawal syndrome like DTs or like cold turkey, and that lasts 96 hours and it's gone. She was talking about marijuana hitting a center within the brain. Now this is pretty much of an adult audience. There's no addiction to sex, but you like it because of pleasure. So when you've been off of tobacco for a year and you go back to smoking, it's a pleasure center stimulus. And that's the addictive behavior that these people here are here trying to help. In the addiction community, and the only people I treat now are airline pilots and addicted professional physicians, there is everybody wants you to get back to work, and everybody wants you to be in recovery. And nobody who enters recovery, in my experience, voluntarily, then gets law enforcement after them because they were addicted to narcotics that they were getting somewhere illegally. And I just say to everybody, your mama and your daddy and the preacher and everybody in the school who wants you to be off the drugs go find somebody that you trust and tell them, and then the system, and I can just take care of it, believe me.
Thank you. Our last submitted question online is, for you, Dr. Whaley, is there an effect on my family or friends from the vapor like there is the secondhand smoke?
I think the short answer is not really. Secondhand smoke is a real issue, and there are some, you know, you have to be really up close to get the particulate matter. I don't think that's the big issue.
Okay. Are there any questions submitted for consideration from the floor?
We had one, Ms. Cantrell, and this was for Mr. Prather, and I'm not going to pronounce my other words correctly. Are the cannabinoids that you've been speaking about the same as those that are found in the CBD oil that is becoming very popular in chronic pain management? And if they differ, how do they differ?
It is the same. It is a cannabinoid. The fact of the matter about CBD oil is there's no legal, there's no testing, there's no oversight of the manufacturer of CBD oil. If you do samples of CBD oil, they can find up to 8 to 10% THC in it. Even though it may say there's no THC in it, tetrahydrocannabinol, which, as I said, is the active ingredient of marijuana, THC, but there is absolutely no oversight of the manufacture of that oil in the United States of America. If you go into a pharmacy to have a prescription filled, or if you're in the hospital and they fill a prescription for you, then the drugs that are put in there have been tested extensively, not only by the manufacturer, many times by the FDA, they've been approved by the FDA. This is a big problem that I have with the legalization of marijuana. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but let's study it just like we study any other drug and get all the results in before we start legalizing something that may do long-term harm. Now, I don't think there's any question now that the DEA has fallen very behind on this because they still schedule marijuana as a Schedule I drug. As I said, that is a drug, according to their definition, that has no accepted medical use in the United States. Well, in fact, marijuana does have some accepted uses. Still hasn't been studied extensively in the uses that they say that it works for, but it needs to be. It needs to be studied very extensively.
I mentioned in my talk that when the drug marijuana, the product marijuana was first used as an experimental agent to diminish the nausea and vomiting associated with chemotherapy. I was a portion of the group that was headquartered in Emory that studied it, and we had marijuana that could be ingested, marijuana branding. We had the pill that is now on the market called Marinol. And at the end of the day, marijuana was not impressive in nausea prevention. It wasn't impressive in pain relief. It didn't stimulate the appetite of HIV patients that might gain 3 pounds to 5 pounds. Not like it was magic, but that drug we use in my oncology practice here at Riverstone and Georgia Cancer frequently as an adjunct to stimulation of the appetite in cancer patients on chemotherapy, almost never for nausea and never for pain. Now, the CBD oil, I happen to have a neurological friend who's head of the National Neurological Seizure Group. There are some studies that children with congenital seizure disorders given marijuana oil that's made at the University of Mississippi by Dr. Melanie who runs the marijuana garden for the United States government and makes that product, uniformly good product, can lower seizure activity. So we're probably 3 to 5 years before we get good data on where any of these products are likely to be used. And the states, in my opinion, that legalized it to go buy it with a prescription written by Leroy in his corner office made a great big mistake.
And this is our final question, and I believe this would go to Ms. Sosebee. What measures are being taken by the federal government to regulate vapors, and do we even think the federal government is taking this seriously?
You know, it would appear from everything that it is occurring recently in the news, and it did hit on a national level really around the same time that it hit us here in North Georgia, that the FDA announced that they were essentially declaring war on Juul. Juul being, of course, just a brand of a particular vape. And with that being said, part of the issue that the FDA had was over the fact that they were marketing primarily to children and to youth. I think a lot of what's happening in terms of the vaping industry and the marketing to children is inherently unfair to our kids. And when I've gone to talk to them, I said in great part, I believe that you are in fact the victims. When you have kids that are walking into gas stations and you have colorfully marketed substances and vapes, and there are flavors like bubblegum and cotton candy, and they're being sold over the counter as if it's harmless right next to the candy bars, what do you expect these kids to think? I mean, you have to be 18 years old to purchase a vape. You're supposed to be 18 years old to purchase any vape products, but when you have locations in the community, and this isn't just our community, that are selling to these kids and they aren't carding, then I think truly where it has to start, and I am proud to say that it has started here, is it going to have to start in a community grassroots, and then if the federal government gets on in terms of regulation, then I think that is spectacular. I read in the news, I believe this morning, that in the midst of what the FDA was doing with Juul, they said you have 60 days to clean your act up or we're coming in and we're going to shut you down. The FDA said that they went in one of the largest law enforcement collaborations that they had in the history of that agency and essentially executed a search and seizure of Juul's headquarters. To me, I would like to think cautiously optimistically that is the federal government taking it seriously, but we are also going to have to address this on a state level as well. Going back to the prior question, talking about the synthetic cannabinoid that we are dealing with and how that compares to CBD oil. What I think is very, very important to understand is the schedule of drugs. What we have in the state of Georgia on our controlled substances is you essentially have Schedule 1 through Schedule 5. Schedule 1 is the highest level that you have, no medicinal value, most addictive qualities. Schedule 5, there are still addictive qualities, but more recognized medicinal value. One example I like to say is Schedule 4 would be a Xanax. We're dealing with a Schedule 1, which is heroin and LSD. This is not CBD oil. This is not low THC CBD oil, and THC is still a controlled substance as well. Everybody has heard of methamphetamine. It is bad. Don't do it. It is highly addictive. It will ruin your life. It will ruin your family's lives. Methamphetamine is a Schedule 2, and the synthetic cannabinoid Panaka that are being found in our children's vapes is a Schedule 1. It is higher than that.
Okay, I don't think we have any other questions, so we'll conclude our meeting at this time. However, our panel members have agreed to stay around to answer any individual questions that you may have. Also, remember that Highland Rivers is a great local resource for us, and we appreciate all of you being here. Thank you again for joining us tonight.